Okay. Hello, everyone. Apologies in advance for my somewhat stunted stage presence. I went for a run this morning, which was slightly longer than it should have been, probably. Anyway, I'm here to talk about a certain journalistic project relating to the beautiful but also occasionally not so beautiful aspects of the Cyclades. But a little background before that. As is well known, Greece went into full-scale financial meltdown early in the previous decade. It ended up very close to, at the peak of the crisis, which was 2015, it ended up nearly finding itself out of the euro. And in order to prevent that, and in order to mollify its official creditors, it went through successive rounds of tax increases and wage cuts, pension cuts, benefit cuts. The result of which was that the real incomes of Greeks basically cratered. After 2015, there was a slow and unsteady recovery to begin with. It started gathering pace after the retreat of the pandemic, I would say. But even then, and despite years of reforms enforced or otherwise, it turned out that the structure of the Greek economy hadn't really changed, and therefore this recovery is very much dependent, again, on tourism and associated services. And that has meant that for the more popular Greek destinations, including some of the better-known Cycladic islands, in recent years, the strain has really started to show. Now, that strain, the strain of over-tourism, takes many forms. One, obviously, is infrastructure. Infrastructure on the islands was lagging behind even before the recent surge of arrivals. It was, so to speak, the darker side of the shiny image of sea and sun that Greece likes to project to the world. But as arrivals have surged and as real estate mega projects are popping up here and there, the strain has gotten a lot worse, and basic infrastructure has really begun to crumble. Now, another aspect of the problem is, of course, that the monoculture, so to speak, of tourism is undermining traditional activities on the islands, like fishing, farming, and the way of life associated with them. And this is a fate which is similar for most destinations which suffer from over-tourism. Essentially, they turn slowly into theme parks for the tourists. The local culture is hollowed out, and ironically, in the long term, that undermines their appeal as tourist destinations. And unfortunately, we're seeing that happening now on a number of the islands. Another unintended consequence of this development fever that has swept over the islands is that life there it's becoming increasingly hard for teachers and doctors, port policemen, other public servants who are stationed there to make ends meet. That means that the islands face chronic understaffing, and it means that the islanders feel an increasing sense of abandonment despite being swamped by people in the summer. And of course, it isn't only the teachers and the doctors who are finding the Cyclades unaffordable these days. They're becoming unaffordable for the average Greek family that wants to visit and have a holiday there. Simple tavernas are turned into gourmet restaurants, as rooms to let are giving way to swanky villas and five-star hotels. We see that the average middle-class Greek family is being priced out from more and more of these islands. And this, of course, is critical because this was sort of like a natural right for modern Greeks. And it is a loss that is arguably more painful than any of the cuts imposed by the bailouts. This is the situation as it stands. And this is something that we, the team that became Sustainable Cyclades, were keenly aware of. We all have, in our different way, a strong connection to the islands. We were seeing how they were being transformed before our eyes with increasing speed and increasing disdain for the laws and regulations. And this was adding to the pressure that was caused by climate change, the drought, the the extreme heat, and so on. But it was only last year where we decided to do something about it. And there were two events that were the catalysts, so to speak. In March of 2023, an archaeologist named Manolis Psaros was brutally beaten here in Athens. What distinguished this archaeologist was that he was in charge of regulating, from an archaeological point of view, building activity on the island, on Mykonos. It was widely perceived at the time that the beating was related to the fact that he was creating frustrations for shady interests on the island. In fact, the front page of Kathimerini the next day, the title was Mykonos at the mercy of the mafia. A year and a half later, no one has been arrested, let alone convicted for this crime. The other slightly more optimistic development was the so-called beach towel movement that erupted that summer, the summer of 23. It started basically from Paros, which is one of the more overdeveloped islands. And basically what it was that the islanders were feeling increasingly shut out from their own beaches, which were taken over by sunbeds and other services, often entire beaches, often in excess of what the permit allowed. So they raised the issue, they acted collectively, they forced the authorities to clamp down. And for us, that was very important because we saw that there was a constituency on the islands themselves for the message that over-tourism was becoming a real threat. Because we didn't want to be pigeonholed as a bunch of elitist Athenians who want to paternalistically tell the islanders how to live their life, and we want to keep them in a state of bucolic underdevelopment for our own pleasure. So we decided to take the plunge, so to speak, and we secured funding from companies and private individuals for an 18-month program. We decided early on that it would be on a Creative Commons license, which means that anyone can republish our work so long as they attribute the original source. And about a year ago, almost precisely a year ago, in fact, we went on our first trips with my chief collaborator, Tassos Teloglu, to find out the lay of the land on the islands. Our original plan was to focus on 5 of them, but this was quickly overtaken by events. As the project became known, we got reports of corruptions and malfeasance, or just plain old bureaucratic inertia, albeit with disastrous consequences, from most corners of the islands. And we tried, with our limited capabilities, to follow up on all the credible ones. The story started flowing. Water supply was a very key issue we delved in. We did many stories from many of the islands. The situation in the Cyclades are essentially a canary in the coal mine for a mounting a looming crisis of water shortage because of declining rainfall and because they have decrepit ancient pipeline networks which lose tremendous volumes of water, and because the old boreholes have been overexploited and have become salinized and so on and so forth. So we did a lot of stories about water, a little obsessed with water, and actually this past summer, water became a front page issue in Greece, in the rest of the country as well, including here in Attica. We did more work on infrastructure. We wrote about those islands which still don't have sanitary landfills, and therefore Greek taxpayers are still paying EU fines because of them. We covered the fight over where to place a new wastewater treatment facility on Paros and what that showed about building outside of settlements and the costs of that. The huge problem of the illegal rubbish dump in Santorini, of course, which is definitely the rubbish dump with the most spectacular view in the world, but that's not a great thing. In Santorini in particular, which is one of the 2 most difficult cases, we focus very much on 2 issues: building activity, because the overbuilding, the overconstruction has gotten to the point where it threatens the geological integrity of the island, and cruise ship arrivals, which in 2023 reached 1.3 million an island of 15,000. So that's a lot. In Mykonos, we tried to cover the efforts, rather lackluster efforts, to rein in the more blatant forms of illegality on an island where real estate disputes are now routinely resolved through violence, including murder. But we also turned our attention to islands which are more protected at this point from over-tourism, but where danger lurks in the form of proposed extensions of the main port and of the road network by the local authorities. Also, and I'll get through this quickly because I want to take a couple of questions. We started promoting our work more and more. We participated in conferences as moderators and panelists. We organized our own conference, which was dramatically and surprisingly oversubscribed in May, called Cyclades Sustainable Cyclades from Theory to Practice. And we plan to do 2 more conferences, one this fall in Sifnos, focusing on the issue of building activity and how to regulate it, and one probably in the spring in Naxos, likely, and focusing on the challenges of farming on the islands. And if you were to ask me, I'm going to ask myself, what our feelings are a year into the project, I would say they're quite mixed. On the one hand, we see that the people who care about the Cyclades, the islanders, people who have a second home there, or who are descended from there, or who just plain love the places, are increasingly aware of the problem and the need to do something about it now. Even our Prime Minister, who has long been wedded to the idea of growth uber alles, is now seeing a little bit of the light, so he's trying to rein in some of the worst excesses, for example, relating to the cruise ships, but also he's held back on legislation on building, which would have done more damage if he had put it forward. And we are proud to have become the go-to source for reporting on this region, which is globally famous, but also very poorly understood. And it's a place of contradictions, you know, a place where you have the glitz and glamour of Hollywood celebrities, but also infrastructure which is at best of a developing country, and also, you know, rampant corruption. On the other hand, it's hard not to feel frustrated when you see how little resources are available to those entrusted with enforcing the law, environmental, zoning law, criminal law, what have you, on the islands. And also, it's depressing to see how the power of money can run roughshod over weak governance, often with the aid of the local population, which is eager to get rich quick and is somewhat heedless of what it's giving up in the process. So that's it for me. We have 7 minutes and 8 seconds for questions.
Hi, hello. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I would like to ask you 2 questions. First is that, are there any cities, or maybe in Europe or in the world, which should be kind of an example for Greece? Like, for example, you know, whether you can take something from other cities, like in Amsterdam, they were putting the limitations on the hotels. There is not possible to build a new hotel anymore, or cruise ships in Venice or something like this. And the other question, that which cities or which destinations could be an example for Greece? And the second question is that for 2 weeks ago, I was in Venice reporting on over-tourism, and many people there told me that Venetians don't even live in Venice anymore, that those are people coming from outside working in tourism. So I would like to ask you also about this, whether, you know, people, islanders, they kind of profit from the tourism, or they are kind of, the gentrifications push them away and people from outside are coming to work there. Thank you.
So I'll answer the second question first because I can answer it better. There's definitely, I touched upon that a little bit in the talk. There are islands where it's becoming more and more pronounced, this phenomenon of the culture being hollowed out and it becoming basically a theme park for the tourists. And my understanding actually of Venice is that one of the reasons that the local population was upset in Venice over the the ticket to enter, which was imposed this year, was that they felt that this kind of put the final mark of Venice being a theme park, and they didn't like that. And I don't know, you obviously know better how effective it's been in terms of limiting arrivals. In terms of, we've done a little looking around to see what has worked, what hasn't worked elsewhere. Unfortunately, there are many more cases, examples to avoid than examples to follow. The only positive thing I see, which has kind of become mainstream this year, is that in many Mediterranean destinations, the local population is beginning to realize the problem and is beginning to agitate and prod the authorities in the direction of regulating things. And I seem to recall that Barcelona took some significant measures in terms of limiting short-term rentals, which are also causing major problems here in Athens. The political will is not there yet in Greece for such things. They're only beginning to take some measures, and unfortunately, probably things will have to get worse before that political will develops and the government can respond to growing anger over what's going on. I answered all your questions in my talk. God, I'm good. I'm leaving the stage. No? Okay. Another.
Yes, sorry, I just want to add that.
Sure.
Thank you. Whether the entry fee limited in Venice? No, there were more tourists than last year.
There were more tourists.
Yeah, so they made a lot of money on it, but the problem is that the people like Venetians, they don't know how they are going to spend the money,
So our Prime Minister, Mr. Mitsotakis, in his speech in Thessaloniki a few weeks ago, said that there would be a fee on passengers who arrive, especially to the more popular islands, basically to Mykonos and Santorini, which would be 20 euros if you want to get off the ship and onto the island. It's a real question if this will reduce demand, and there are already sort of arguments against it, but it does seem to me that, and from all our discussions on a number of issues, whether it's airport arrivals, the number of cars available to rent, et cetera, that if you really want to protect an island and protect its so-called carrying capacity, you have to set caps. You have to say that, you can't have 17,000 people arriving on cruise ships a day, but much less. But that has always been politically controversial. Okay.
So, as someone who comes from a place that, like growing up, I saw the distinct difference between going from a rural village to basically a very popular tourist destination. Are there any success stories or examples to be followed of things that the local population can do to take initiative to actually protect their habitat, their village or their town or wherever it is that they are, to keep it more friendly to the local population rather than exploiting it for tourism? Because in my experience, like, in Greek, βάλαμε τα χεράκια μας και βγάλαμε τα ματάκια μας.
We're good at that.
Yeah, we use our hands to pull our eyes out, as in we sacrificed our place to tourism. And I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to highlight as an example to be followed by the people.
Yeah. So we have tried to focus also on positive stories. We have a story actually out this week about a fantastic farm in Naxos, which is using really cutting-edge methods to rejuvenate the soil on an island which, like all the other ones, has suffered from tremendous decrease in rainfall, et cetera, et cetera. And when I was in Tinos in July, I did a couple of stories on people who are active. One of them is a farmer, the happiest farmer you'll ever meet probably, even though he's working in really difficult circumstances. A guy who has his own his winery and his vineyards there. And both of these people continue to do these traditional activities and to do them super well. And they have a symbiotic relationship with tourism because, Michalis Kontizas, the winemaker, he has benefited very much from tourism. on the island. He sold most of his wines on the island, and then, you know, the tourists wanted to visit the wineries, the vineyards, so that's how he became better known, and now he's exporting. And Fabianos, the farmer, has been selling to the better tavernas, let's say, on the island, and also to individuals, and has also benefited from tourism. But these are positive stories, and there are many positive stories like that, but for the problem to be solved more widely, you need government will, and that means the way Greece works, central government will, to impose caps and to enforce, especially building regulations, and to prevent people from building wherever they want, which then means that water has to come to them, sanitation has to come to them, etc., etc. I'm out of time. Okay, guys, thank you so much.